We are used to the brutal simplicity of infamous American crimes, like the axe murders of Lizzie Borden. But there is something far more unsettling about a perfect crime. Across the Atlantic, a murder occurred that completely baffled the greatest minds. Even Raymond Chandler, the father of American detective fiction, admitted defeat. He called it the impossible murder, stating that the accused could not have done it, and yet nobody else could have either. Welcome. Today we are unraveling a chilling call from beyond the grave. The year was 1931, and the setting was the industrial port city of Liverpool, England. Amidst the terraced brick houses and the lingering winter chill, lived a remarkably unremarkable middle-aged couple. William Herbert Wallace, an insurance collection agent, and his wife, Julia Wallace, resided in a modest, tightly packed home on Wolverton Street. Their lives were defined by quiet domesticity, solitary evenings, and an overwhelming sense of routine. William was a frail, mild-mannered intellectual, and his days were spent trudging from door to door, collecting small insurance premiums from working-class families. There was absolutely nothing in their mundane existence to suggest that they were about to become the center of one of the most baffling mysteries in modern history. On the cold, dark evening of Monday, January 19th, William partook in his singular regular social activity. He had traveled to the Liverpool Central Chess Club, which convened at a local cafe in the city. As he sat hunched over a chessboard, deeply engrossed in his tactical maneuvers, the telephone at the establishment rang. The club secretary answered the receiver. The man on the other end of the line asked specifically to leave a message for Mr. William Wallace. The caller identified himself with a rather peculiar name, R.M. Qualtrough. According to the secretary's later testimony, the voice was highly distinct. It was strong, confident, and rather gruff. Mr. Qualtrough had a highly specific business proposition. He claimed he was looking to take out a substantial life insurance policy and wanted to discuss the comprehensive details with William personally. The mysterious caller left a firm set of instructions. He requested that William call on him the following evening, Tuesday, January 20th, to finalize the paperwork. The address provided for this lucrative meeting was 25 Menlove Gardens East. For a humble insurance agent accustomed to scraping together pennies and shillings, a proactive client actively seeking a large policy was an exceptionally rare opportunity. Yet, this sudden injection of fortune into William's rigorously predictable life carried a subtle, unspoken tension. Why would a prospective client track down a modest insurance agent at his local chess club after hours, rather than simply contacting his corporate office during the day? The extreme banality of William's daily existence stood in stark, almost jarring contrast to the aggressive urgency of the enigmatic Mr. Qualtrough. Oblivious to the creeping shadow falling over his life, William finished his chess match. Upon being handed the written message by the secretary, the meticulous insurance man reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his small personal notebook, and carefully jotted down the details. He tucked the little book away, completely unaware that this seemingly innocent address would not lead to a profitable business deal, but straight to a death sentence. The following evening, Tuesday, January 20th, 1931, William prepared for his highly anticipated meeting with the mysterious Mr. Qualtrough. At approximately 6:45 p.m., he buttoned his heavy winter coat, said goodbye to his wife Julia, and stepped out of his modest home on Wolverton Street. He walked into the bitter, biting chill of a January night in England and boarded a local tram. He was heading toward the affluent suburbs of South Liverpool, expecting a routine business transaction. He had no way of knowing that he was stepping directly into a meticulously designed labyrinth. After a long, rattling tram ride across the city, William arrived in the Menlove Avenue district. It was an upscale, quiet residential neighborhood, a stark contrast to the tightly packed, terraced streets he was used to. Consulting the careful notes he had taken at the chess club, William began his search for number 25 Menlove Gardens East. Walking under the dim, flickering glow of the gas street lamps, he quickly located Menlove Gardens North. A few minutes later, as he navigated the winding roads, he stumbled upon Menlove Gardens South, and shortly after, Menlove Gardens West. He paced the freezing pavements, his breath pluming in the icy air, fully expecting the next intersection to reveal his destination. But the grid seemed to defy logic. He walked in circles, retracing his steps, but the street he was looking for simply wasn't there. There was absolutely no trace of Menlove Gardens East, assuming he had merely lost his bearings in the dark. And increasingly frustrated, William began to ask for help. He first stopped a passing tram conductor, inquiring about the elusive address, but the man had never heard of it. He then stopped a few local pedestrians who were equally baffled. Finally, seeking a definitive answer, William spotted a police constable on his evening patrol. He approached the officer, explained his predicament, and showed him the address written clearly in his pocket notebook. The officer looked at the book, then looked at William, and delivered a sentence that sent a strange chill down the insurance agent's spine. "There is no Menlove Gardens East. It simply doesn't exist." William stood on the sidewalk, completely bewildered. The sheer absurdity of the situation began to wash over him in the freezing cold. Why would a prospective client go through the highly elaborate trouble of calling a chess club, leaving a specific message, and sending him on a long trek across the city on a freezing Tuesday night, only to direct him to a phantom address? It felt like a bizarre, cruel, practical joke. For nearly an entire hour, William had wandered these dark, unfamiliar streets, knocking on the doors of houses on similarly named roads, desperately chasing a ghost. He was tired, freezing, and thoroughly annoyed. But for those analyzing the case decades later, the creeping horror of this moment is undeniable. William wasn't merely the butt of a senseless prank. He was being deliberately, surgically removed from his neighborhood. He was a pawn being moved off the chessboard. Accepting defeat, the frustrated insurance agent finally gave up his futile search. He trudged back to the tram stop to make the agonizingly slow journey back to Wolverton Street, believing the absolute worst thing to happen to him that night was a wasted tram fare and a bit of a cold. He had no idea that he had just played the lead role in a masterfully orchestrated wild goose chase. Because while William was out shivering in the dark, desperately looking for a phantom address, a very real monster had just knocked on his front door. At nearly 8:45 p.m., an exhausted and freezing William finally arrived back at his Wolverton Street home. The winter night was pitch black, and the house was entirely dark. He tried his key in the front door, but it was bolted shut from the inside. Confused, he walked around the narrow back alley to try the rear entrance. It, too, refused to open. Growing increasingly anxious, he encountered his neighbors, John and Florence Johnston, who were heading out into the alleyway. With their presence serving as witnesses, William tried the back door one last time. Strangely, it now yielded, opening into the dark kitchen. William stepped inside, striking a match to light the gas lamps as he moved through his silent home. What he found in the small front parlour would forever stain the history of true crime. His wife, Julia Wallace, lay lifeless on the hearthrug in front of the fireplace. The scene was utterly horrific. She had been brutally and repeatedly bludgeoned. Blood was violently splattered across the walls, pooled heavily on the carpet, and sprayed across the adjacent furniture. The sheer, overwhelming violence of the attack stood in terrifying contrast to the quiet, intensely mundane life the middle-aged couple had led. When the local police arrived, they immediately began reconstructing the evening, interviewing neighbors and canvassing the street. This is exactly where the case transformed from a tragic, bloody home invasion into a terrifying, seemingly impossible puzzle. Detectives quickly tracked down a crucial witness, a 14-year-old local milk delivery boy named Alan Close. The boy firmly testified that he had delivered milk to the Wallace residence and spoken directly to Julia at the front door. The precise time of this interaction was firmly established between 6:30 and 6:45 p.m. She was alive, well, and acting entirely normal. But here was the agonizing problem for the investigators. Multiple witnesses, including a highly reliable tram conductor, definitively placed William Herbert Wallace boarding his tram to start his wild goose chase at exactly 6:49 p.m. Let us break down the incredibly tight mathematics of this murder. Between the milk delivery boy seeing Julia alive and William boarding his tram, there was a maximum, agonizingly brief window of just 15 minutes. In a mere quarter of an hour, the killer would have had to initiate a confrontation with Julia, launch a frenzied and incredibly bloody physical attack, realize the catastrophic extent of the mess, thoroughly wash themselves clean of any forensic evidence in the dark, dispose of the murder weapon, which was never found, secure the locks on the doors, and casually walk down the street to catch a tram. When William arrived home, and when police thoroughly examined him that night, his appearance was immaculate. There was not a single microscopic drop of blood on his heavy winter coat, his trousers, his shirt, his hands, or beneath his fingernails. It was the textbook definition of a perfect, locked room mystery. Every single piece of physical evidence, backed by an airtight, undisputed 15-minute timeline, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that William Wallace was completely innocent. The frail insurance man could not possibly have committed such a savage, lightning-fast murder. At least, that was the inescapable conclusion, until detectives decided to look into the chess club, specifically tracing exactly where the mysterious R.M. Qualtrough phone call from the night before had actually originated. While the physical timeline pointed firmly to his innocence, the detectives observing William Herbert Wallace felt a growing, visceral sense of unease. In the immediate aftermath of his wife's brutal slaughter, the middle-aged insurance agent did not weep. He displayed no outward signs of shock, hysteria, or profound grief. Instead, he remained icy, analytical, and eerily detached. To the police, this was not the demeanor of a devastated widower. It was the chilling composure of a seasoned chess player who had just executed a flawless checkmate. This suspicion pushed investigators to dig deeper into the origins of the bizarre RM. Qualtrough message. They contacted the local telephone exchange and managed to trace the exact source of the call placed to the Central Chess Club on Monday night. The result of that trace broke the case wide open. The mysterious caller had not phoned from the affluent suburbs of South Liverpool. The call had been placed from a public telephone kiosk located a mere 400 yards away from William Wallace's own front door. Armed with this damning proximity, The police constructed a terrifyingly calculated hypothesis. There was no R.M. Qualtrough. It was William himself who had walked down the street on Monday evening, slipped into the phone box, and raised his voice with a gruff tone to speak with the club secretary. He deliberately set up the phantom address of Menlove Gardens East, effectively manufacturing his own elaborate, undeniable alibi for the following night. According to the investigators' explosive theory, the seemingly impossible 15-minute window on Tuesday was not an exoneration, but a testament to William's cold-blooded efficiency. They argued that immediately after the milk boy left, William slipped into a heavy Macintosh raincoat, a garment later discovered completely soaked in blood and violently shoved underneath Julia's lifeless body. Using his own raincoat as a protective forensic shield, he savagely beat his wife to death, stripped off the bloody outer layer, washed his hands, secured the locks, and calmly strolled out into the winter night to board his 6:49 p.m. tram. He was never wandering helplessly. He was simply letting his ironclad alibi clock in. It is a narrative that violently tears the observer in two. Are we looking at a frail, innocent man framed by a phantom killer who knew his schedule perfectly and used the local phone box to complete the illusion? Or are we staring into the dark mind of a domestic mastermind, a man who literally shielded himself from his own horrific crime to orchestrate the perfect murder? Riding on the strength of this incredibly persuasive, yet entirely circumstantial narrative, the police officially arrested William Herbert Wallace. He was to stand trial and face the hangman's noose. However, the British justice system was about to experience a shock completely unprecedented in its long, dark history. In April of 1931, William Herbert Wallace stood in the deeply shadowed dock at St. George's Hall in Liverpool, desperately fighting for his life. The trial was an absolute media sensation, drawing massive crowds eager to catch a glimpse of the man the press had dubbed the chess murderer. The prosecution's case was notoriously, almost aggressively, circumstantial. They could not present a single, convincing motive to explain why a mild-mannered, deeply routine-oriented man would suddenly obliterate his wife of nearly 20 years in such a frenzied attack. Furthermore, they could not explain away the absolute, glaring lack of physical evidence. There was not a single drop of blood found on his clothes. The murder weapon had completely vanished into thin air, and the supposedly brilliant 15-minute timeline was stretched to its absolute breaking point. Yet, the jury was completely mesmerized by the prosecution's dark, compelling narrative of a domestic mastermind. They bought into the chilling theory of a husband orchestrating a phantom phone call and utilizing a heavily soaked raincoat as a protective blood shield. After deliberating for barely an hour, the jury returned to the courtroom and delivered a devastating verdict: guilty. The presiding judge placed the traditional black cap upon his head and formally sentenced William Herbert Wallace to death by hanging. As William sat trembling in his cold, damp cell on death row, counting down the agonizing days to his execution, his defense team launched one desperate, final effort. In May of 1931, they brought the high-profile case before the Court of Criminal Appeal in London. It was a monumental long shot. Criminal appeals in that era were notoriously difficult to win, usually only succeeding if the original trial judge had made a massive, undeniable procedural error regarding the law. But what happened inside that appellate courtroom sent massive shockwaves through the entire British legal establishment. In an absolutely unprecedented, historic legal twist, the panel of appellate judges did something they had never done before in British history. They completely overturned the jury's guilty verdict. The judges ruled unequivocally that the conviction could not be safely supported by the incredibly flimsy, purely circumstantial evidence that the prosecution had presented. They boldly declared that the case against William was simply not proven. Just weeks before he was scheduled to face the hangman's noose, William Herbert Wallace walked out of the courtroom as a totally free man. However, his miraculous legal exoneration did not translate into personal salvation. When William returned to the familiar streets of his hometown, he was met not with sympathy or relief, but with an intense, suffocating wave of public hostility. The local population, heavily fueled by months of sensationalist newspaper headlines, had already convicted him permanently in the unforgiving court of public opinion. The general consensus was that he was a terrifyingly brilliant killer who had literally gotten away with the perfect murder through a frustrating legal loophole. He was relentlessly shunned on the streets, entirely ostracized by his former chess club friends, and quickly forced to resign from his long-held insurance job due to the constant harassment. The man who had survived a horrifying death sentence was effectively banished into a life of complete and utter isolation. The immense stress, coupled with his profound loneliness and a broken spirit, rapidly deteriorated his already frail physical health. Just 2 short years later, in early 1933, William Herbert Wallace died quietly in a local hospital from a severe kidney illness. He passed away completely alone, taking whatever agonizing secrets he truly held directly to his grave. The absolute truth of what happened in that dark, bloody parlor was officially buried forever, leaving behind nothing but a chilling sense of profound injustice and an enduring, century-long confusion. Now, I want to step out of the narrative for just a moment. I want you to imagine that you are sitting in that dimly lit jury box in 1931. Look at the contradictory facts laid out before you. On one side of the scale, you have a physically frail man constrained by a mathematically impossible 15-minute window. He supposedly committed a savagely bloody, frenzied attack, completely scrubbed himself clean of all forensic evidence, secured a locked house, and caught his scheduled tram. On the other side of the scale, you have a mysterious phantom phone call that just so happened to originate from a public telephone kiosk a mere 400 yards from his own front door. So, I am asking you directly, what is your final verdict? Was William Herbert Wallace a cold-blooded, ruthlessly calculating criminal mastermind who engineered the ultimate foolproof alibi? Or was he the tragic, unsuspecting victim of the most elaborately constructed, flawless frame-up of the 20th century? Please, let me know your definitive ruling down in the comments below. To this very day, the fierce debate rages on among historians, criminologists, and true crime enthusiasts alike. It is a case that continuously defies every logical explanation we try to apply to it. As we noted at the very beginning of our investigation, the legendary American detective novelist Raymond Chandler spent years obsessing over these exact contradictory details before finally admitting complete defeat. His final, chilling assessment of the Wolverton Street tragedy remains as accurate today as it was decades ago. I call it the impossible murder because Wallace couldn't have done it, and yet nobody else could have either. Thank you so much for joining me today to unravel this incredibly baffling historical mystery. If you enjoyed diving into this classic locked room puzzle, please give this video a thumbs up, leave your theories in the comments, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss another deep dive into the darker side of history. Your engagement truly helps this channel grow and allows us to keep bringing these forgotten stories back to life. Don't forget to check out the next true crime episode appearing on your screen right now. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.